Alright, so we're back in the Saturn Astra, and today we're going to be taking a look at that check engine light. Now, most modern cars after 1996 have what's called OBD2, and OBD2 is basically onboard diagnostics. Global OBD2 is basically a language that all cars sold in the US had to respond to. Now, some heavy-duty trucks didn't have to do it until later. Essentially, there's a generic language that all the vehicles should talk to. So your check engine light and your engine control module, powertrain control module, whatever triggers that engine control or the check engine light or service engine soon, or however that light appears on your dash, whatever controls that should respond. That way you're able to get the vehicle fixed. And it's mostly about emissions. And in order to check those, most cars should have a connector down here, like just above their pedals and stuff. Some do have them in weird spots. The European Astra, it's under this panel here. In the US Astra, it's not there. In the US Astra, it's under here and should be clipped into like this piece of plastic. Looking at global OBD2 codes can be pretty simple. This is just a little tiny code reader that I've had for a while. So when I was in North Carolina, they had state inspections, and at the dealer you had to check these readiness tests to see if they passed in order to see if you can get a vehicle to pass the inspection. Now luckily up here in Minnesota they don't have that, so this little tool's handy. It's just a little bit of a pain in the butt because you've got to time this correctly. So I've got to not so much watch the phone, but watch the tool. And I want to hit it right when it gets on to read codes. Because with just the two buttons, it can cause a problem. Like sometimes like the next one might be clear codes and you might wind up clearing codes. So the first code is a P2096, undefined code. Anything that's above like a P1000 is oftentimes like a dealer level code, or one that's reserved for the manufacturer. And then it might be different. So like a P1000 code for a Volkswagen might be different than a P1000 code for like a Chevy Astro. So it's just going to be one of those things where you'd have to look this up. So you'd search for P2096 on 2008 Saturn Astra, and I think if I remember right, this should be something where it's basically like the engine's lean, so it's running lean, which means that there's not enough fuel being put in for the amount of air metered in. So essentially your O2 sensors are saying, hey, I don't have enough fuel coming in. Then you've got a P0068, so it's got MAP. So your MAP is your manifold absolute pressure sensor, and then when I hit the button it'll probably give me the rest of it. Yep, absolute pressure. And it's got /MAF, so that's your mass airflow sensor. So mass airflow dash throttle position correlation. A P0420 catalytic converter system efficiency below threshold bank 1. And then we're back to the beginning. So the big thing for this is that I've got a couple codes. They're all dealing with air, and they're dealing with a lean code, the ability to meter air being compared to the throttle position, and a catalytic converter system efficiency below threshold, which could be due to the lean condition as well. Or they could all relate to like an oxygen sensor being failed. And then they could relate to a couple other different things. But, so I'll back out of this real quick. And we'll just pop into here real fast, just to make sure everything's pretty much run and isn't completed. Okay, so I'm good with that. And then you can check the mill status, which that's basically just saying, so the mill is the malfunction indicator lamp. So that's your check engine light, or an SCS, service engine soon. So however it displays on your gauges. And if I wanted to, I could hit this now and clear the codes, but I don't want to at the moment. So with the codes that it currently has, I was taking a look at the intake. So here's the vehicle's intake. You've got your intake air box here, your air filters under here, here's a tube, here's your mass airflow. You got your snorkel, or the rest of the air intake, then your throttle body's down here. The MAP sensor is somewhere in this general area. So I'm not 100% sure, but the first thing that should stand out, especially if you're looking at a used car, is anything that looks super weird. So here's a clamp, and you can see it's got a hex head on it. Here's a clamp, it's got a hex head on it. Here's a zip tie, and then there's a clamp with a hex head. So why does this have a zip tie here? So if you check this, if I wiggle this, that's not moving. Those clamps are on solid, nothing weird. I wiggle this, that zip tie is not doing its job. So with the zip tie not doing its job, that means air is getting in here, which means it's bypassing the mass airflow. So the MAP sensor, which is down in here and checks pressure, is able to say, hey, the mass airflow says we're only supposed to have a little bit of air coming in, but I'm reading we got a bunch of air coming in. And then your O2 sensors will probably be going, well, I don't know why the mass airflow is wrong, but the MAP sensor's saying this. I don't know who to believe, but for me, we're running lean. And then between the front O2 sensor and wherever the rear is, probably underneath the vehicle, back behind the engine somewhere, those two are saying, hey, there's something going on where in the front part of the cat, I'm reading this much exhaust. So the exhaust is this rich or this lean. And then the rear one is saying that the catalytic converter isn't cleaning it enough. So it's below threshold, it's not cleaning it enough. So in a situation where you're out of fuel control, so where you've got possibly an air leak that's causing the mass airflow and your MAP sensor to disagree, the computer's trying to feed it the right amount of fuel that it thinks it needs, and your O2 sensors are going, hey, we should be here, why are we not here? It becomes a situation where the first thing I need to do is put a clamp on there. And then once I put a clamp on there, I can clear the codes and test drive the vehicle and see how long it takes for that light to come back on. So I'm hoping that's it for the problem. And I'm really hoping it's not going to be a situation where they drove for such a long time with that check engine light on for it pulling stuff in here that they actually damaged the catalytic converter to such a degree that now it needs a catalytic converter as well. But whenever you look at a new to you car, so a car that's used, that's one of the things you really got to look for, is that, you know, what doesn't seem quite right. So I got the mass airflow sensor out, and then as you can see, it's got an arrow that points back the way the airflow goes. So just in case you end up forgetting, that's important to note. But you can kind of see the dirt that was around it. And as you can imagine, that dirt got sucked into the air intake with having just that zip tie on. So that caused probably maybe like a little bit of wear or something. That's something that I've never really noticed or taken note of. But if you do want to take something like this out, go ahead and real quick throw something like a rag in that. So the big reason for just throwing the rag in is that there's times where you might get, you know, this might be out for a minute or two, but it winds up being, you know, out for an hour and a half or something. And especially if it's, you know, just in your driveway, so it's out and about, it's going to be something where you never know if a bird or a squirrel or a mouse or something like that might wind up running up and stuffing something into it. So it might be like, hey, this is a perfect spot to hide a, you know, I don't know, black walnut or like a acorn or something like that, or like what was common, we used to find on a lot of Ford trucks, dog food in that big round air intake that they have. So it's kind of crazy, but just to help keep everything kind of safe and clean, just go ahead and jam something in there real fast. And then what I'm going to wind up doing is taking this other clamp and taking the other clamp to the auto parts store just to see like how big it needs to be. So because this is about the same size as that one. So, and then I may or may not wind up looking into getting like a mass airflow cleaner. So like a mass airflow cleaner is different than like a normal brake cleaner, because with the mass airflow it needs to be super clean and not leave any residue behind. And I don't know the exact way this one works. I don't know if I can get it to focus on the inside, but you can see the two wires there. And some mass airflows are like a hot wire setup. So basically it's got a hot wire and a cold wire, and it knows that based off of this side of the wire, if this one gets, you know, if it gets so much airflow, then it obviously pulled air through this fast. So you've got this much air coming into your engine. So what I may wind up doing is just grabbing the can of mass airflow cleaner and just giving it a light spray down. And you don't want to do it a lot, and then you want to make sure that, like, if your mass airflow is mounted in this orientation, keep it in that orientation when you clean it, because you may not want the stuff going up into like little orifices that you can't be 100% sure that you got stuff out of, and that you didn't want to just blowing stuff up and into. I got back from the parts store and I kind of swapped some of the clamps around. So this clamp here used to be up here, and if you look, this clamp is skinnier than my fingernail. This clamp is wider than my fingernail. So that might be why it had a zip tie on. Maybe that clamp's hard to find. Maybe that's an expensive clamp or something. I don't know. But I'm hoping that with this one, I was able to slide it far enough forward. I slid the clamp far enough back to avoid pinching right down on these fingers. So the little fingers in the mass airflow intake that are on both sides and the fingers in the tubes help to keep the mass airflow aligned. Because like you can kind of think of the flow of the air going through this pipe as water. So if you were to run water through this, you would have more water going around certain areas and less water going around other areas. And knowing the orientation, I don't know if you guys can hear the geese, but the designers and engineers, when they set this up, probably know the orientation of where this is. So it knows how the air should flow through it, and that kind of sets up how the mass airflow uses its logic. So when the mass airflow reads so much air going by, like X amount of air going by, they know that X amount of air is going by the mass airflow, but maybe there's more air shooting around these corners than the air running down the center, or that the air flows differently through it. So that's why sometimes if you change to like a cold air intake, you may wind up getting a check engine light. Anywho, this is all good and tight. Everything's in. I cleaned the mass airflow, and then we're about to hook the wire back up, and we'll fire it up, clear the code. So we're back in the car, about to clear the code. Not the easiest thing to read the screen on the phone. I'll cheat. So that should be clear codes, erasing, erase OK. So The check engine light's still on, but it's still in the bulb check. But if we shut this off, go key back on, the codes may turn off. The light may turn off. Or it won't turn off until we fire it up. So, as you can see, lights out. Now, when I was talking about the readiness codes earlier, the readiness codes, whenever you clear a code, you lose your readiness codes. So on here, it shows like misfire supported, fuel system supported, can't read, components supported, misfires complete, so it ran the test, that's complete, fuel systems complete, components complete, cat supported, heated cat not supported, evap system supported, not supported. So a lot of times if it's not supported, it's not equipped. The AC refrigerant is one that they use. They proposed having that be a monitor, but I believe that got voted out and they kind of left the software in there though. So heated cat's complete, evap system's not complete. So anytime you clear codes, maybe the battery goes dead, this is kind of important. But also, should you happen to look at a used car and you notice that these codes, there's not completes in there, there's a chance that there's a check engine light that the person cleared. That way you couldn't tell that there's a problem. I started thinking, I had a car years ago where basically I had a crack in this convoluted pipe. And it was just one of those things where it was a rubber pipe, and eventually in one of these little lands and valleys and stuff like that, it cracked. But this one doesn't have any cracks as far as I can tell. And I figured I'd take a look at the throttle body while I'm here. So here you can see the throttle body, and it looks relatively clean, but the dark carbon that you see there could be worse throughout. So you can see on that side, it's just about black, and it's probably pretty dark inside too. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this Seafoam top engine cleaner, and basically you fire it up and you get a spray going down inside of there with the throttle open enough that it's running about 2,000 RPM, but not to exceed 3,500 RPM. And you get the engine kind of warm before you do it, and then you run the whole can through. It says it should take around 7 minutes. I think the last one that I did took about 5 minutes. And then once you get done with it, with running the can, then you let it sit for about 10 minutes or something. Yep, with the engine turned off, resecure the intake and allow it to hot soak for 10 minutes. Then fire it up and drive it for over 10 minutes, and then apply spirit acceleration when safe to burn off hydrocarbon residues. So sometimes this makes a lot of smoke come out of your tailpipe. So it'll be one of those things where you just got to be careful that you want to get out of town or something. Otherwise, you want to do it in an area where maybe you're not fogging out your neighbors. They want you to use this back underneath the intake. So basically you would hook this down so that the black part loops around the intake and then sprays in, and then you're able to put the more or less the boot back on, or the intake back on, so that it isn't wide open like this. But I'm going to do it so it's wide open because I think it'll run better. With it being a GM, sometimes they're a little bit finicky with how this goes, but I think mass airflow disconnected, this should fire up and run. It should try and use the map sensor and the base mapping and the O2 sensors to try and run. But we'll find out. I may have to wind up slipping the intake back over. It's running about 2,000 RPM. I got a pry bar pushed against the seat, pushed against the throttle pedal. So that should hold it pretty consistent. The big thing will be listening for a big pitch change. As you start to squirt into there, it may wind up alter the fueling, so the engine may die. So it's about to go into the hot soak, but I figured I'd just open the throttle blade so you could see. And you can see a big difference already. That is way cleaner than it was before. So this cleans the throttle body and pretty much the intake and the valves. So anything that it can come in contact with. So, but right now it's in the hot soak. And then I've got, I think, about 8 more minutes. So this is the inside, like the intake tube by the throttle body. And I've cleaned it up pretty good already, but you can see there's a lot of aluminum corrosion on this. And that aluminum corrosion could have caused air to bypass it as well, which could be part of the problem that we had. So I'm getting as much of this knocked off as I can, and then I'll get it tightened back up. Fired up, idling's good. Now we'll go for a test drive and see if she smokes. Alright, so as you can see right now, it's blowing a bit of smoke. So that's what it's supposed to do. But when you get on it, it may blow a lot of smoke. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take it on the highway just outside of town and then give her the beans a couple times. So just a quick point on the Astra in general. So the Astra has a 1.8 liter engine with variable valve timing. That's a pretty cool engine, but it's definitely no drag race hero. So we'll give her the beans on this on-ramp. Alright, so we're all done with the test drive and we're back. And we're checking the readiness codes. So the catalytic converter check is complete. Heated cat check is complete. Evap system check not complete. Secondary air, refrigerant, O2 sensors complete. O2 sensor heaters complete. PGR is complete. So essentially with just that one code being not completed yet and it being that evap, if you were in an emission state, this would pass. This worked out pretty good. So it looks like the clamp's doing good as far as not causing the code to come back. The throttle body, well, I guess I suppose the top engine cleaner stuff worked out pretty good. The biggest thing with that though is you just have to be careful, because even though I drove it for a while and it blew a lot of white smoke out, there's the chance that in the next couple days I could fire this up and it's still going to blow a little bit of white smoke. So it all just kind of depends as it gets everything all cleaned out. I'm hoping we should be good now. Everything's still good and tight. It's always good to double check, make sure everything's good. So hope you guys enjoyed the video. I'll check you guys next time. Somewhere. Son of a bitch. Was this not taping? Oh. Does that date me that I said taping as opposed to recording? Alright. So, I don't know when that stopped recording. Wait, let's just watch the video real fast. Whoa, you're so smart. And then hit the throttle. Like a light switch.